art is, for me, a way to talk about ideas, questions I have about the world. It's a way to engage with communities. It's a way to engage with the landscape, which, is like really what I love to do. I mean, to see the shape of the land, but also how people interact and have, made impact on the land. These are things that are really important to me. So, I mean, I make the visual art because other forms of communication are just not my approach. I mean, I've tried writing. I played music for many years when I was younger. But once I started photography, it was, wow, that's the way in which I can communicate. So from that point on, there was no turning back. So it's a way to talk about things that I care about and to interact with people.
Yeah, but then, okay, for you it's clear that it's a way of communicating, it's a way to communicate.
Inherent in photography are all these contradictions. It's a very, on the one hand, very simple medium. Like you can take a picture. Many people, you have your phone. You can take a picture. But to really say something with a photograph is a challenge. But it's also very accessible. So I like these contradictions that are built into the medium.
Yeah.
And I like that the photograph is both a record of, you can record events, you can record situations, but then it's also really poetic and aesthetically, like compelling. So I like all those contradictions about it.
And what you do, so there is something in your work that is really special, that what you do is actually like framing things. It's not, you don't touch or you don't you don't stage any, right? So you just have to select the frame, the perfect frame, the image that you want to express.
Yeah. I mean, part of my process is really it's a very physical process for me. I mean, walking in the landscape and walking through, the woods or any of the, on the ground that I'm walking in is very important, and returning to places many times to get to understand it on a physical level.
Yeah.
So, but there's always this kind of abstraction that is happening with the photograph, this framing of the world. Mm-hmm. Every once in a while I may move things around, but for the most part, you're right. I will make the photograph from what I see out there in the world.
Yeah. And have you had this experience of going out or walking in Colombia, those days that you have been here?
Not as much as I would like. I mean, there was a lot of, doing some walking in the urban areas. We did the workshop with students.
Yeah.
And we walked in, through neighborhoods and a little bit of interaction. Maybe not so much interaction with people, but with the landscape, with the urban landscape. I would love to walk, through the woods, those very dense and very interesting wooded area. I don't know if you call them woods, like forests.
Jungle even,
Yeah, very, I would love that. Because for me, part of understanding a space is really being there physically. Yeah. And the walking is a way to both be, contemplative in the mind and also in the body with the camera. So where did I sort of start being thinking about places? And so when I started photography, I was in college. I was like halfway through college. Mm-hmm. And
It's art? Did you go to the art school?
I didn't. I was in college studying English, like literature. And American literature, and because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I loved reading, and I thought maybe I would write, and I wasn't very good at writing. And like I said, when I found photography, I took a weekend workshop, and that just changed my life. And I was living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, or near Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I was wandering around a lot of urban and somewhat sort of transitional neighborhoods. And that's where I started making my photographs. Like lots of neighborhoods and lots of communities north of Boston, Massachusetts, that were in transition, going from, you know, either working class neighborhoods to some gentrification, or the opposite, going from, you know, factory towns and then decaying communities. Yeah. So I was doing a lot of photographing, and that has continued. This idea of the sites in transition, like places that are in transition, have always been of interest to me. Good. I'm glad you see that. I mean, I think that there are a number of things in my work that are like they thread through all of my projects, like a concern for the environment, a concern for social conditions, and even also concern for economic conditions. But that's not like, it's not always obvious. Like if you look at, I am interested in my work making an impact over time. So, you know, you might, it's not all in a single photograph. It's just like the walking through a landscape and getting to know it. I'm interested in the accumulation of knowledge through the visual.
So somehow you what you're doing is like fabricating some experiences with several images. I asked you for 5 images and you sent me 15 images.
I know.
Even more,
Yeah. Right, because, and I apologize for that, but you know, because I know that being concise with, like, it's a true skill to edit and be concise with the work, and so I know that that's important. But on the other hand, I wanted you to get a sense of what I have been doing in sort of the breadth of it, because it is in the accumulation of the many, like the process is important to me. What is the first artwork that I would consider? Yeah. I recently found the very first roll of film that I made in this weekend workshop that I told you about. So, and I remember one of the images that the teacher, you know, said, "Oh, whose is this one?" And I remember making it. It was so many years ago, but it was that such an impact on me. So it was, you know, it was just a wall in an urban location. And now looking back on it, I understand why I might have made that photograph, the very first roll of film I ever took. And there were the wall had these archways, and this form of, I mean, I think that one of the sets of images that you were interested in talking about were the mounds, from the Mounds series. Yeah. And this form of the archway, or the form of the, you know, that shape, is something, for whatever reason, I've been drawn to for all of these years. So, and I don't really know why, but I think that I just trust that it's authentic for me.
Okay. Yeah, it would be nice to see it.
Yeah.
These are the images you sent us. This is one of them. And one of the things that I love of your work is how sharp it is, and how many details on the definition of the images. Yes.
So I'll just say that the title for this work, I'll say a couple things about this project. So the title is Significant and Insignificant Mounds. And these are all mounds that are Native American mounds, so indigenous mounds in the area where I am. Well, actually, they're in Illinois, and I'm living in Missouri, but very close to here. But also the mounds that are the mounds of our 20th and 21st century industrial production. So things like landfills and toxic waste sites, and those kinds of things. And in fact, in this region, they sit sometimes side by side with one another. So the project is looking at this again, we were talking about these contradictions and these paradoxes. The project is looking at how this is just this incredible juxtaposition of the Native American mound sites. This is an indigenous site, and then the contemporary toxic and waste sites. So they're all mounds.
The Swedes,
they're all mounds, and sometimes one is confused for the other. Yeah. So this is, usually like they're titled just mound and then like an indicator number. So one doesn't know, like the viewer doesn't know, is this a Native American mound, or is this some other kind of industrial mound? Yeah. And that's important that confusion or that question gets raised, because part of the project is asking, how do we place significance and how do we place meaning on the things that we see and the things over history that we, over history's time that we read.
Yeah.
Yes. No. You bring up something that I'm very sensitive to and very interested in having the photographs communicate, and this is the idea that the land holds I believe that the land holds memory, and that land holds a certain kind of residue of its own history. And so a question that I work with is it possible to feel and then depict in the photographs, but is it really possible to feel that residue that's still on these landscapes, in the land, land that holds a certain kind of energy that you're talking about?
Yeah, it has this connection with the land. And when we talk about connection with the land, we always talk into this paranormal or even metaphysical thing that is not very scientific, but I think that's something that we actually missed, or that lack of relationship with the land and that interferences that we build around the connection with the land. It affects the way we relate with others.
Yes, and this photograph that you have up here, I mean, I think this is a great one to talk about the context a little bit as well. So this is a mound site, a sacred mound site, and it had at one point, not too long ago, it had a house right in built right into the side of it. The house has recently been taken down, but and you can see the fence around the mound to protect from vandals and people coming to recreate or destroy the mound. But this is a sacred mound, and right now it's owned by the Osage Nation, although originally it was part of the whole Mississippian mound culture, of all the same mounds that are in the region. But the question right now is what to do with this site, and you can see it's starting to erode away. I mean, it was once much larger. It's had many different kind of histories about it, and the question is what to do with it today, what to do with it now, to sort of memorialize it, or how to memorialize it, how to protect it. And all the while there's a house, there's still a house next door. There was a house literally embedded in the mound. You can see that this pole there is for a big billboard that is situated there for the highway. The highway is right beside it, behind me where I'm standing. So the question of how to preserve these sites or how to acknowledge these sites is also that's not the focus of my project, but in making this record, or it's making the photograph and making a sort of acknowledgement of the contradiction that sort of exists in our contemporary time. That's part of what I'm doing.
Yeah. But what are those mounds for? What in their culture? Yeah.
Yeah, so the mounds were a lot of things. I mean, they were some of them were ceremonial mounds. Some of the mounds were burial mounds. Some of the mounds were used for farming. Some of the mounds were actually, just a product of the community's living. So, some of their own trash and all of that. But for the most part, they were ceremonial, burial, and farming.
How about this one?
And I should also say with the project, the larger project is a collaborative project. So I work with a creative partner who is a writer, an artist, a landscape architect, surveyor. And together, this is our project together, where we are, the research of the mapping and his writing and my photographs and the diagrams that come from, land surveyors way back a century ago who were discovering, walking through this landscape. This is part of the project. Strange March snow that we had, and I had been photographing this is a toxic zinc mound, so the residue from zinc processing, the zinc plant processing.
Wow.
And I had been photographing this for a while, and one March day I woke up and it was snowing, and I knew exactly where I needed to go. I knew that I had to go because you see the mound itself, it's this dark, just black mound, and that dusting of snow was just, it was perfect. It was just what I needed to make the photograph. So, I think this goes to what we were talking about before, about like returning to places over and over again and really getting to know the landscape over time.
What to do with painting when photography is already invented? What to do with now with photography that we have so many ways to disseminate and to distribute images?
Yeah, very interesting. I talk about this with my students a lot. I mean, because they are of a generation where Instagram is the way they understand images. Yeah, and this is a site that had quite a large mound on, in fact, the largest Native American mound on the St. Louis side, on the Missouri side of the river. And the mound was dismantled, taken down in the 1800s, and this plinth was there was a rock that was placed on there as a memorial to this massive mound. It was called Big Mound, and then that site was even moved. So the memorial to the big mound that was taken away was moved, and this is what remains. So this idea of erasure, historic erasure, like physical material erasure, that's something that I'm working with in many projects, and this mounds work is also, that's a feature of the Mounds project as well. A symposium recently, and we were all considering the idea of archive, different kinds of archives, and somebody spoke about something that really made a lot of sense to me. They were talking about the landscape as an archive, that so this idea that the landscape holds memory, and over time, it's the question of what does the landscape hold, and how over the centuries is that archive of those memories still present. Like when I first started photography, I didn't think about scale very much. Obviously you're always doing this kind of translation of the world into, from the real scale to the photograph, and that is scalar. But in the last few years, I've really been thinking a lot about scale and sculpture, and I think that, I shared with you some of those photographs that I had made of the radio tower that fell, and I really, like, the idea of scale started to enter my consciousness even more so after I had been making that work, because the massiveness of that fallen tower, and then again moving into that space and really actually I climbed it a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, and as it was on the ground. So the scale and this physical aspect of the scale is something that I have really been thinking about a lot. Yeah, I mean, it is, but as you can see, they all overlap to some degree or another, and they're all pretty much still ongoing. So the mounds work is still in process, and we are, slowly trying to book of that work, and I'm, still exhibiting that work, and I'm still making that work. The between the levee and the river is relatively new, but it's not new landscape for me. I mean, I've been wandering around that landscape for a while now, so there are ongoing projects. Yeah.
So, Jennifer, what if it's not art? What else would you do?
I mean, honestly, I do something with photography and art every single day. I don't know, I mean, I would have an existence, but I wouldn't have a soul. Wow. I mean, I don't think anything.
And you said you started as a writer. I mean, you wanted to become a writer, but that's also art somehow. And then you talk about music, but that's also art. So
yeah, I mean, those were things that I enjoyed doing, and I didn't enjoy writing, but writing is very, very hard. I enjoy reading quite a lot, and the power of language is really something that I've carried through, or the knowledge of that I've carried through in photography. So, but I don't know what else I would do. Those other things are pleasurable, but they, like I said, they just don't. I wouldn't feel that I was connected to a soulful life if I didn't make art.
Yeah. And how was your life these days of pandemics? And you teach? You also?
Yeah, I am. I'm teaching still, and it's very challenging right now. I mean, I'm teaching in a hybrid mode, so we, some is on Zoom and some is in person. I'm teaching a number of classes that require, a lot of lab work. So I'm teaching a black and white photography class and some other classes that require people are in the lab. So yeah, we're doing a fair amount in person, and that's
at least and that's what is important about college is you've made partners and
I know. I was actually thinking about, one of my favorite things in Colombia was when you greet somebody, you give a kiss on the cheek, and it's just the beautiful kind of hug or a greeting, and no handshake, and even that people are nervous about now. So I really loved that gesture, and how many of these things are just gonna go away and be altered completely.
All right, Jennifer, it's been great, fantastic conversation.
Thank you. Well, likewise, I'm really honored you asked me, so it's great to connect again, and thank you.